Welcome to the Network Plus Prepcast, your dedicated audio companion for mastering every objective on the CompTIA Network Plus certification exam. This series is produced by baremetalcyber.com. Local communication across network segments depends on a set of protocols and processes that allow devices to find each other, resolve addresses, and avoid interference. In episode 114, titled CSMA/CD/RP, and neighbor discovery, we focus on these essential link layer tools that support Layer 2 and Layer 3 communication. These tools are foundational for local delivery of frames and for ensuring proper traffic flow. Without them, devices wouldn't know how to find each other on a subnet, collisions would be unchecked, and Layer 3 addressing would not connect to hardware identifiers. For real-world networking and certification exams alike, mastering these protocols is key. CSMA/CD/ARP and neighbor discovery appear frequently in foundational exam questions. Whether troubleshooting an incomplete address table or explaining why a device can't reach its gateway, these mechanisms provide the underlying support that makes local delivery and addressing work. They are not just passive features. They actively ensure that frames are transmitted without collision, that devices can discover each other, and that both IPv4 and IPv6 networks can bridge Layer 2 and Layer 3 correctly. Because they're used in nearly every network, understanding them is a must for success on the exam. CSMA/CD stands for Carrier Sense Multiple Access with Collision Detection. This mechanism is used in traditional Ethernet environments to manage how multiple devices share a transmission medium. When two or more devices attempt to transmit simultaneously on a shared channel, a collision can occur, resulting in corrupted frames. CSMA/CD minimizes this by requiring each device to check the channel before transmitting and to take corrective action if a collision is detected. Although it is not used as much today, it remains a core concept in Ethernet's legacy design and often appears on certification exams. The way CSMA/CD works is relatively simple in principle, but critical in operation. Before transmitting, a device listens to the channel to ensure no one else is sending data. If the channel is clear, it begins transmission. If another device happens to transmit at the same time, both devices detect the collision, stop sending, and wait for a random back-off interval before retrying. This process repeats until the frame is successfully delivered. Understanding the listen-before-send logic and the role of back-off timers is crucial for answering related exam questions. CSMA/CD is only relevant in half-duplex Ethernet environments, which were more common in older networks that used hubs. In those networks, all devices shared a single collision domain, and collisions were a frequent concern. In modern networks, most Ethernet connections are full duplex and use switches, not hubs. In full duplex mode, there is no shared medium and thus no need for collision detection. That's why CSMA/CD is largely obsolete in current deployments, but still tested as part of historical and theoretical networking knowledge. ARP, or Address Resolution Protocol, plays a vital role in IPv4 networks. It is the mechanism that allows devices to map IP addresses to MAC addresses so that packets can be delivered over Ethernet. Whenever a device wants to communicate with another device on the same subnet, it must know the destination's MAC address. If that information is not already in its local table, it sends an ARP request to learn it. Without this process, IP communication within a local area network would not function properly. The exam routinely includes scenarios where ARP behavior must be analyzed. The ARP process begins with a broadcast query, asking, who has this IP address? Every device on the subnet receives the request, but only the device with the matching IP address responds. That response is a unicast reply that includes the responding device's MAC address. The original sender then stores that MAC address in its ARP cache and uses it to build the Ethernet frame for the intended packet. This three-step exchange, broadcast, reply, and cache, update, is often depicted on exam diagrams and is critical to understanding local delivery in IPv4 networks. The ARP table, also known as the ARP cache, holds the MAC to IP mappings that have been recently learned. These entries typically expire after a few minutes unless they are refreshed by new communication. Administrators can view the table using operating system commands like ARP-A or network equipment commands like show IP ARP. In some cases, static entries can be manually added for critical devices to ensure consistency. Questions on the exam may present ARP table output and ask you to verify whether a device has learned the correct MAC address or why communication is failing. Gratuitous ARP is a special type of ARP message used by a device to announce its presence or to detect address conflicts. When a device powers up or changes its IP address, it may send an unsolicited ARP reply that says, "This IP belongs to this MAC address." This announcement helps update ARP tables on other devices and avoid stale information. It is also used for conflict detection. If another device responds to the gratuitous ARP that indicates a duplicate IP address on the network. The exam may test this concept through questions involving high availability systems or IP conflict resolution. While ARP is functional and essential, it is not secure. One of the primary vulnerabilities of ARP is its lack of authentication. Any device can send an ARP reply, even if it doesn't own the IP address in question. This opens the door to ARP spoofing attacks, where a malicious device sends false ARP replies to mislead other systems. These attacks are often used in man-in-the-middle scenarios, allowing the attacker to intercept or manipulate traffic. The exam often includes questions about this vulnerability and ways to mitigate it using security tools and dynamic ARP inspection. In security tools, ARP inspection, IPv6 does not use ARP. Instead, it relies on Neighbor Discovery Protocol, or ND, which serves a similar function but offers more capabilities. ND uses ICMPv6 messages to manage address resolution, router discovery, and network parameter identification. It performs the same basic task as IRP, resolving IP addresses to MAC addresses, but does so in a more structured and extensible way. Understanding the transition from ARP to ND and the added benefits ND provides is important when preparing for exam topics related to IPv6 and dual-stack environments. For more cyber content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Neighbor discovery in IPv6 consists of several distinct message types that perform roles ranging from basic address resolution to router location and traffic redirection. The core message types include router solicitation and router advertisement, which allow devices to locate gateways and obtain configuration settings. Neighbor solicitation and neighbor advertisement messages are used for address resolution and reachability confirmation between devices. Finally, redirect messages inform hosts of a better next hop router for a particular destination. Together, these messages enable devices in an IPv6 environment to discover their neighbors and communicate effectively at layer 2. Duplicate address detection, or DAD, is a specific use of neighbor solicitation messages designed to prevent address conflicts. Before an IPv6 host uses an address, it sends a neighbor solicitation message targeted at the address it wants to use. If no device responds, the address is considered unique, and the host proceeds to use it. If a reply is received, the address is already in use and must not be assigned. This process helps maintain address integrity in environments where IPv6 addresses may be generated automatically, such as through stateless address auto-configuration. The exam often includes questions on how DAD works and its role in preventing address duplication. Address resolution in IPv6 using neighbor discovery is functionally similar to ARP in IPv4 but uses ICMPv6 messages and operates through link local communication. When a device needs the MAC address of another local device, it sends a neighbor solicitation message to that device's solicited node multicast address. The target device then responds with a neighbor advertisement message containing its MAC address. The initiating device stores this in its neighbor cache, similar to an ARP table. Understanding this flow is essential for comparing address resolution between IPv4 and IPv6. Securing neighbor discovery is more complex than securing ARP because ND relies on ICMPv6. It can be susceptible to similar types of spoofing and redirection attacks. To address this, the Secure Neighbor Discovery Protocol, known as SEND, was developed. SEND adds cryptographic protection to ND messages using certificates and cryptographic signatures. However, because of the complexity of implementation and lack of widespread hardware support, SEND is not commonly deployed in enterprise environments. On the exam, you may be asked about SEND as a mitigation option, but also be expected to understand its practical limitations. Viewing neighbor cache entries in IPv6 environments is done using tools similar to those used for ARP and IPv4. Commands like ipneighbor on Linux or show IPv6 neighbors on Cisco devices allow you to inspect current mappings between IPv6 addresses and MAC addresses. These tables help diagnose issues like unreachable devices, stale entries, or improper address resolution. Entries in the neighbor cache are typically temporary but may persist based on traffic patterns or manual configuration. On the exam, output from these tables may be shown for interpretation or troubleshooting. The relationship between layers 2 and 3 is made possible by protocols like ARP and ND. These protocols act as translators, resolving logical IP addresses to physical MAC addresses. Without them, devices would not be able to send frames across Ethernet, as the network interface requires the destination's MAC address. In most environments, this translation is handled automatically by the operating system or switch. Still, it is important for administrators and exam candidates to understand how these processes work, especially when diagnosing communication issues or interpreting packet captures. Troubleshooting ARP and neighbor discovery issues often involves checking for incomplete or incorrect entries in the respective tables. An incomplete entry usually means a request was sent but no reply was received, which could be caused by device failure, filtering, or network segmentation. Incorrect MAC address responses might indicate a spoofing attack or misconfiguration. Failed local delivery of packets often results from unresolved address mappings, especially in stateless environments. For the exam, expect to analyze outputs or scenarios where local delivery fails and determine which step in the resolution process is broken. To summarize, link layer protocols like CSMA/CD, ARP, and neighbor discovery are foundational components that support local network communication. CSMA/CD helps manage collisions in shared Ethernet segments, even if it's mostly obsolete today. IRP handles IP to MAC resolution for IPv4, enabling devices to communicate on the same subnet. In IPv6 environments, neighbor discovery takes over that role and expands it with additional capabilities like duplicate address detection and router discovery. These tools, while often operating silently in the background, are essential for network performance and stability. As we wrap up episode 114, it's clear that addressing and discovery protocols form the glue between logical addressing and physical delivery. CSMA/CD provides a historical foundation for collision handling. ARP enables vital address resolution in IPv4 networks, and neighbor discovery expands on this with more features in IPv6. Whether viewed from a theoretical or practical standpoint, these protocols play an irreplaceable role in how networks function. On the exam, expect to be tested on both how they work and how to troubleshoot when they fail. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Network Plus Prepcast, your trusted audio guide to the CompTIA Network Plus certification. This episode was produced by baremetalcyber.com. For more cybersecurity podcasts, books, and resources, visit baremetalcyber.com. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cybersecurity Plus podcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com. And before you take the test, make sure to check out the practice questions in the book Achieve CompTIA Security Plus SY0-701 Exam Success by Dr. Jason Edwards. They cover every domain and are a powerful way to lock in your knowledge.